Deep in the Colorado desert lies a place so extreme, even the most ruthless criminals call it hell on earth. The ADX Florence Supermax prison, home to terrorists, cartel bosses, and serial killers. Locked in concrete boxes 23 hours a day, some lose their minds, others sharpen them. Tonight, we're peeling back the steel doors and entering the minds of the men society buried alive. What happens when monsters are caged together, yet forever alone? This is deconstructing the minds of ADX Florence inmates. They call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. ADX Florence isn't just a prison, it's a machine built to erase human defiance. With motion sensor doors, pressure pads, and steel designed to withstand bombs, escape is impossible. Every detail, down to the way windows angle toward the sky, ensures inmates never glimpse freedom. Yet behind those walls lives a paradox. A collection of some of the world's most dangerous men, all confined to silence, left to wrestle with nothing but their own minds. Inmates spend 23 hours a day inside concrete cells the size of a bathroom. Meals slide through steel slots, lights never fully dim. The sound of chains echoes through the halls like a metronome of despair. 1 hour of recreation, alone in a small caged yard, feels like a cruel joke. Psychologists call it sensory deprivation. Guards call it safety. Inmates? They call it torture. This environment doesn't just punish the body, it strips the mind down to its rawest instincts. One wing houses the most feared terrorists, 9/11 conspirators, bomb plotters, men who once commanded armies of followers. Here, their power dissolves into dust. No lieutenants, no sermons, just 4 concrete walls. Intelligence agencies monitor every letter, every word spoken in the yard. But what does isolation do to men who once lived for chaos? Some sink into madness. Others cling to ideology, whispering prayers. Into the silence, determined that even ADX Florence cannot cage their belief. El Chapo. Ociel Cardenas Guillen. Men who built empires on fear now pace inside boxes like zoo animals. Cartel leaders, used to controlling thousands, find themselves unable to control their own schedules. Studies show that power withdrawal is as agonizing as drug withdrawal. The bosses scratch graffiti into the walls, scrawl orders into coded letters that rarely escape. For them, ADX is more than prison, it's erasure. What happens when the world forgets a kingpin who once ruled entire nations? Not every inmate is a terrorist or kingpin. Some are America's darkest homegrown killers. Serial murderers, spree shooters, bombers. Men like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, who spent his final years here before death. These minds are different, obsessed with manifestos, mathematics, twisted philosophies. In ADX, they face the same crushing solitude. But while others deteriorate, killers like Kaczynski thrived on isolation, scribbling theories in notebooks. For some, the cell becomes a coffin. For others, a laboratory. In ADX Florence, silence isn't just policy, it's weaponized. No shouts, no conversations, no laughter. The soundscape is sterilized, broken only by the shuffle of guards' boots and the metallic clank of doors. Psychologists compare this to an unofficial experiment in sensory deprivation. For most humans, prolonged silence leads to paranoia. Inmates report hallucinations, voices whispering their names, phantom footsteps in the hall. A former warden once admitted, ADX is designed for inmates to slowly deteriorate. The silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to face memories they once drowned in drugs, power, or chaos. Some inmates resist by talking to themselves, out loud for hours. Others compose letters to nobody, rambling streams of consciousness that prison psychiatrists quietly call Tom, yet the institution rarely intervenes. ADX doesn't try to fix broken minds, it simply contains them. And in that containment, silence becomes both executioner and confessional. ADX Florence has a little-known unit called the H Unit, its psychiatric ward. Here, the inmates whose minds collapse beyond repair shuffle down fluorescent-lit corridors, medicated into stupors. Some bang their heads against the walls until guards intervene. Others rock back and forth for hours, whispering fragments of prayers or curses. Doctors label it chronic isolation psychosis. Symptoms include panic attacks, paranoia, hallucinations, even self-mutilation. Former staff have testified that men in ADX cut themselves just to feel something. Yet, here's the paradox. The prison was built to hold men too dangerous for society: terrorists, gang bosses, mass killers. But in doing so, it often drives them deeper into madness. In the H unit, prisoners are locked away from even other prisoners. It's isolation within isolation, a place where the line between punishment and torture blurs until it vanishes completely. For men stripped of freedom, rituals become lifelines. Some inmates fold origami cranes out of meal wrappers. Others pace their cell in exact mathematical patterns, 13 steps forward, 13 back, over and over. It's a way to cling to control inside an environment built to erase it. Cartel bosses recite coded prayers, hoping underlings on the outside will decipher their meaning. Terrorists repeat daily worship with mechanical precision, whispering in corners where cameras can't catch their lips. Serial killers scratch tally marks into the paint, measuring time in obsessive strokes. One psychologist who studied ADX said, "Control is the only currency left inside those walls." Guards notice how inmates cling to tiny rebellions, refusing food, flooding toilets, or saving sugar packets to ferment crude alcohol. These rituals aren't meaningless quirks, they're survival tactics. Because in a place designed to dismantle identity, even the smallest act of self-discipline feels like defiance. Sanity inside ADX is a battlefield. Some prisoners weaponize their minds, turning to books, study, or writing as defense. Ted Kaczynski, for example, thrived in solitary, using isolation to deepen his obsessions. Ramzi Youssef, the 1993 World Trade Center bomber, memorized entire passages of the Quran. They transformed their cells into classrooms of obsession. But for others, the mind collapses into chaos. Without external stimulation, thoughts become loops, nightmares replayed endlessly. An inmate once told a lawyer, "My brain is eating itself." The prison offers therapy, but in practice, sessions are brief and guarded. Psychologists rotate too quickly to build trust. The system doesn't heal, it manages. And so, survival comes down to mental strength. The men who find purpose, no matter how twisted, endure. Those who cannot, spiral. The difference isn't who they were outside, it's who they become when their only companion is the voice inside their head. To understand ADX, you must also step into the minds of its guards. Every day, they walk into a fortress of America's most feared men. Yet behind those thick walls, it's not just inmates who feel the weight of silence. Guards describe an atmosphere heavy with tension, like living inside a pressure cooker. One former correctional officer said, "It's not the violence you fear, it's the silence before it." Because even with every safeguard, guards know, desperation breeds ingenuity. Inmates find ways to weaponize toothbrushes, to pass messages, to defy the system in small, haunting ways. Psychologists warn that the staff suffer too. Constant hypervigilance erodes their mental health. Many quit early, citing nightmares and paranoia that follow them home. ADX doesn't just cage criminals, it cages everyone who works inside. And so, the line between guard and guarded blurs, as both live under the crushing weight of a place designed for total control. When words fail, the body becomes a weapon. At ADX, hunger strikes have become one of the few ways inmates reclaim agency. Refusing food forces the system to notice them. The ritual begins with a simple tray pushed back through the slot. Once, twice, a week straight. Guards document everything. Calories refused, weight dropped, signs of collapse. For some, it's political protest. Terrorists demand recognition. Cartel bosses attempt leverage. For others, it's despair, an attempt to disappear faster than the prison intends. The Bureau of Prisons often responds with force-feeding. Tubes shoved through nostrils, down throats, pumping life into bodies that no longer want it. The ethics of force-feeding remain hotly debated. Human rights groups call it torture. The prison calls it necessity. But for the men inside, hunger strikes are one of the last remaining choices, an act of defiance where pain becomes language and starvation becomes speech. Despite total isolation, communication never dies. Inmates at ADX Florence find ingenious ways to pass messages. Letters are written in invisible ink using milk from breakfast cartons. Codes are hidden in Quranic verses, chess moves, or obscure math equations. Guards intercept many, but some slip through. The prison once intercepted a coded note from a terrorist inmate instructing followers abroad. Another time, cartel bosses disguised orders as children's drawings, smiley faces concealing deadly logistics. These fragments prove something chilling. Isolation does not erase influence. Forensic linguists are employed to dissect every word. Intelligence agencies monitor even casual phrases. Yet, like water seeping through cracks in stone, messages find ways to flow. The irony? ADX was built to silence men who commanded empires. Instead, it created masters of coded whispers. The mind adapts, always searching for a way to be heard. Though, ADX boasts almost zero successful assaults, violence still exists, hidden, psychological, and sometimes explosive. Prisoners lash out at guards, smear excrement on walls, or flood cells as acts of rage. But the most haunting violence occurs in silence. Suicides. Hanging is rare due to constant surveillance, but inmates find ways, fabricating ropes from bed sheets, drowning in sinks. Each death shakes the facility. Guards become hardened, yet privately haunted. Fellow inmates, even those who despise the dead, feel the weight of it. Because in ADX, a death isn't just one man's end. It's a reminder that escape from the prison of the mind is possible only through the ultimate exit. Prison officials downplay these events, calling them isolated. But lawyers, families, and former staff describe a different truth. Every suicide ripples like an earthquake, reminding all that in the Alcatraz of the Rockies, survival itself is an act of violence. No one has ever escaped ADX Florence, not once. Yet the mythology of escape lingers like smoke in the minds of inmates. They whisper theories, tunnels hidden beneath, helicopter rescues, bribes big enough to bend steel. In reality, the architecture itself is a puzzle designed with no solution. Floors are pressure-sensitive. Air ducts are too narrow. Even recreational cages are covered with welded mesh. Yet inmates still dream. Some hoard plastic spoons, scratching at grout. Others study guard routines with obsessive focus, imagining loopholes that don't exist. One inmate reportedly claimed he could vanish into the Colorado desert within hours. His plan stopped before it began. Guards know the attempts are hopeless, but they watch anyway. Because in a place where hope is forbidden, escape fantasies become psychological lifelines. And sometimes, believing you might escape is the only way to survive never leaving. The punishment of ADX stretches beyond the walls. Families of inmates suffer a slow exile of their own. Visits are rare, heavily monitored, sometimes impossible. Glass partitions separate fathers from sons, brothers from sisters. Conversations are rationed like contraband. 30 minutes here, a letter there. For children, memories fade. A father becomes a ghostly voice on a monitored phone line. For wives, the marriage becomes correspondence. Love reduced to ink on censored paper. Some families cut ties altogether, unable to carry the burden. Others cling tighter, refusing to let concrete and steel erase their bond. But even for those who persist, the relationship changes. Inmates learn to edit their emotions, hiding despair from mothers, hope from children. Families learn to live in fragments. And so, ADX doesn't just cage men, it cages entire bloodlines, turning family trees into roots that grow in silence and separation. In ADX, the fiercest battles aren't fought with weapons, they're fought within. Prison psychologists describe inmates creating elaborate inner worlds. Some replay crimes in endless loops. Others construct fantasies of freedom so vivid, they blur with reality. A cartel boss once told his lawyer, "In my mind, I still dine with my men every night." A terrorist whispered that his cell became a battlefield where he still fought the West. These illusions are survival tactics, yet they carry danger. The mind can't distinguish fantasy from reality forever. When the line collapses, psychosis rushes in. For a few, inner worlds keep them sane. For most, they become prisons inside the prison. A warden once remarked, "ADX doesn't just cage men, it cages their imaginations until they devour themselves." And in that devouring lies the essence of Florence, a war fought in silence, with no victors. Even in isolation, legends are born, whispers about certain inmatees, circulate through the blocks like ghost stories. El Chapo, the drug lord who escaped maximum security prisons in Mexico twice, remains a mythic figure, even in Florence. Inmates speak of him in hushed tones, the man who tunneled under walls, bribed armies, yet now stares at four gray walls like everyone else. Then there are the terrorists, the ones whose names still dominate headlines. Ramzi Youssef, Terry Nichols. Inmates who shaped world events from the shadows. To fellow prisoners, they are symbols, proof that even men who once shook nations can be erased by silence. But not every legend is born from power. Some come from madness. Stories of inmates smearing cryptic symbols in blood or screaming sermons into the night. These tales are exaggerated, distorted, but in a world starved of stimulation, myth becomes currency. Legends are the only things larger than the cell. At ADX, time isn't marked by clocks. It's measured by decay. Hours stretch into days, days into years, until time itself becomes the enemy. One inmate told his attorney, "Every minute here is a century." The design of the prison ensures monotony. The same meals, the same lights, the same concrete view of sky, never horizon. Psychologists explain that without change, the brain begins to wither. Memory fades, emotional range dulls. For some, the past becomes as unreal as the future. But time also sharpens desperation. Inmates calculate release dates like sacred numbers. Some cling to parole hearings decades away, convincing themselves freedom is possible. Others, serving life without parole, surrender entirely. For them, time isn't just an enemy. It's an executioner, carrying out the slowest death sentence in America. And for the staff watching, the cruelty of time is the unspoken truth. ADX doesn't kill, it waits. ADX Florence was built not just as a prison, but as a monument. A statement by the U.S. government. Some men are too dangerous to ever walk free. Yet as the years pass, the prison outlives its inmates. One by one, they die in their cells. By suicide, by age, by illness, until their names fade from public memory. But ADX remains. Steel doors slam. Chains rattle. New inmates replace the old. Terrorists from fresh wars. Kingpins from new cartels. The cycle repeats, endless and unchanging. For society, ADX is reassurance, a fortress keeping nightmares locked away. For the men inside, it is the final chapter of their existence, a place where legacies are smothered and even the most feared names dissolve into silence. The prison doesn't just hold bodies, it holds ghosts, and in time, every inmate becomes one. So what happens when you strip a man of freedom, silence his voice, and bury him in concrete for decades? At ADX Florence, you don't just punish the body, you dismantle the mind. Some inmates adapt, clinging to rituals, fantasies, or raw defiance. Others collapse, unraveling into madness. Guards, families, even society itself, all become entangled in the shadows cast by this fortress. ADX Florence is more than a prison. It is America's ultimate mirror, reflecting our darkest fears, our thirst for justice, and our capacity for cruelty. In the end, the question lingers. Is ADX Florence protecting us from monsters, or creating new ones, one silent cell at a time?